Hi, everybody. Welcome to season 3, episode 6. Oh my gosh, what a morning it's been. I've got my tissue. I have a little bit of a bloody nose. So if we see the blood, we're just going to roll with it as we're interviewing today our amazing, beautiful guest. I'm so excited to have you on, but it's just behind the scenes, as being human, I just like to share that it's not always perfect. It's not always like social media, right? So, and I've gotten into this pattern. What am I saying? That's not even true. I have a autistic ADHD brain. So my ADHD brain likes to do 100 things before my appointment, my podcast. So just so everyone knows, I literally was running around like, how many things can I squeeze in before I get on? And then bloody nose slowed me down. So here I am. I just want to welcome to our podcast the most beautiful human, Renee. Renee, how do you say your last name? I don't want to.
Rosales.
Okay, Renee Rosales, and I've got to just touch up the bloody nose, everybody. So I'm just going to brag about you, and then we're going to get rolling. Okay.
Sounds great.
So Renee, as a mother, educator, advocate, and transformational leader, yes, she is, has set out to build a better way for the neurodivergent or neurodifferent humans in the world. As an innovator, she is the co-founder of 2 of the first virtual schools in Arizona. So that's where our podcast producer, who's amazing, Tatum, is located. And the founder of Theara. Is that right? How you say
Theara,
it?
we call it Theara.
Theara,
And there's a story
okay.
behind the name, but yeah,
Okay.
it's a different kind of, I put 2 words together for Theara, but I'll let you finish.
Theara. So I definitely want to hear about that. So it's a business designed to support the neurodifferent from cradle to grace. How gorgeous is that? As a visionary, Renee has always sought to make the intangible tangible, love it, creating connections and building bridges in relationships that positively transform all aspects of love. Renee has dedicated her life's work to helping the neurodistinct establish belonging and connection. Hi, Renee.
Hi, so great to be here.
So great.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Well, yeah, let's start with Theara. Tell the world about where that beautiful name came from.
So I'm a creative writer, and I have always kind of written stories on the side, and the heroine in the story, essentially, her name was Ara. And I actually didn't name her that. It was Arabella, but I only called her Ara ever in the story. So I looked it up, and Ara means table of offerings. And so Theara, I put together the Ara. This is my table of offerings to everything I've learned as a neurodivergent myself, as the parent of neurodivergent children, as an educator. I wanted to lay it all, out there for parents and help guide them through the neurodiverse journey. It's not an easy one all the time, and it's wrought with a lot of negative stigma. We struggle with those microaggressions every day, all the time. And I was listening to you talk to your podcast with Allie Dearborn, talking about removing the D's, and that's been such a big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, we don't need to be calling these things deficits, disorders. I mean, they are neurological differences that should be celebrated, because it's the neurodivergence of the world that are likely going to solve a lot of the major problems of our future, because we think differently, and the neurotypical brain doesn't have all that insight. It's a different perspective that I think everybody should learn to appreciate in a different way.
Well, I agree. And I love that it's a table of offerings, and this is your table of offerings.
Yes.
So let's start with, a lot of times when adults have neurodifferent children, they'll take them in, for instance, to an assessment, and then perhaps the assessor says to the parent, hey, do you wonder if you are? So I'm curious if that was your journey.
My journey was a little different. So I grew up in a household. My grandfather started a counseling center years ago. Our family was very intimately involved with that work. Both my parents worked at the center for much of my upbringing. Although not therapists, it was the language that I grew up in. And I also started therapy at the age of 12 because it was like right there available to me. And I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD. And I know now that I also am probably autistic as well. But I have never been officially diagnosed autistic, although my mother is autistic. And I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until 29. And honestly, I had masked and I had gotten by and I had done well in school and let my ADHD work for me and really kind of was dismissive of it until my son we started recognizing differences in him. And my older boy, I have three boys, and a daughter, and my older boy, he presented with those issues, with the ADHD issues, but we were already dealing with it. When my second son was born, he didn't talk. There were developmental delays, and I took him in right away. I was an early talker. My other son didn't have any speech issues. And I was recognizing these issues when he was like 2. And so the pediatrician was pretty dismissive. I went and took him to the nearby university, had him evaluated there. And it turned out that he had childhood apraxia of speech. And he didn't talk in an intelligible way until he was almost 4. And we began the journey then. And as his neurodiversity began to unfold, he's dyslexic. I believe he's also on the spectrum, but that's not his primary diagnosis. And I started to recognize and begin to really more embrace my own neurodiversity. And then I was dealing with it every day academically because I was directing an online school, and an online school is a non-traditional environment. So I was seeing a lot of these kids that were neurodiverse, and they wanted that environment because they were having such a difficult time in a larger group of more neurotypical individuals. So that led me down this road, and I started there. And then my relationship, because this is the sexiest podcast, so I want to talk things sexy.
Oh my gosh, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah, no, I don't want to just dive into the parenting journey, but it's what got me there, because my husband he's also dyslexic as well. And we were in this mixed neurodiverse relationship. And as things began opening up with my son, things began shifting in my marriage. And we began becoming more aware of how much our neurodiversity was impacting our relationship, and started really embracing it in a whole new way. And that's kind of where everything began to really positively shift and transform. Although I must say, it wasn't always easy. I mean, we hit roadblocks. I listened to another podcast where you were on with Chris, and you guys were talking about practicing pause. And we had to learn to do that, because I think you and I are alike in that when he would just walk away and I would panic inside, I'm like, what are you doing? You don't care, and all of that stuff was coming up. And now we've learned to communicate it in a loving way. I need, a break. We both do it when I get dysregulated, and I'll request the pause too. And I always try to think of, I use acronyms to guide my brain through things. So I use my PEACE acronym to kind of help me move through the process.
I love that. Holy cow, there's so much to unpack. Tell everybody what your PEACE acronym is.
It's practice exercising amicable, calm engagement.
What?
So I just go there and how can I get to that place of calm, whether I need to go do some mindfulness, some deep breathing, go on a walk, whatever I need to do to get into my body, know that my body is already telling me, because you feel all that stuff. And it's much more dramatic with your love relationships, because they're what matter to you most, and what caused the most pain for us a lot of times. And so, you're not going to get anything accomplish when you're playing that tennis ball back and forth with each other, so
Yeah.
the calm, and it's been such a transformational thing for Anthony and I. So
oh my gosh, you've said so much. So first, I just want to acknowledge that there's so many of us in the neurodiversity movement who are committed to changing the dialogue that is going on in schools among teachers and then medical professionals and mental health therapists, because the roadblocks are so detrimental to not only our neurodivergent children, but also us as adults, and especially being females. We go under the radar for so long, and then are constantly misdiagnosed. We are exhausted, right? Like I started therapy early too, completely misdiagnosed, have had the worst, most horrific things said to me by clinicians. And so that needs to change. So kudos to you. Kudos to you for being an advocate, not just for your kids, but also for you and your relationship, right? Because it just has to change. So I just really want to salute you. I also want to repeat your acronym so that everyone hears that, because we live in a world that is too loud, too bright, there's too many people, and it's too much. It's too much for human nature, and it's too much for those of us that are neurodifferent, who feel everyone's energy, which medical providers and mental health professionals need to know. The number one thing that is our issue is that it's too much energetically. Then let's add on all the sensory stuff. So peace is this: practice exercising amicable, which could mean like, what would you say? Like friendly,
just kind,
kind.
when you look, I'm a word lady, so it essentially means kind, calm.
I love it. So practice exercising amicable or kind, calm engagement. And how we get there, and I love that you talked about this about you and Anthony, is we got to do just kind of, let me step back for a minute. Let me pause. I've talked about that so much. And let me just see what's going on inside, because there's 4 types of empathy in what you described, which again, for so many of us that are neurodifferent, is somatic empathy, where we feel physically so strongly other people and what's going on, even if we can't acknowledge it, that just that alone can lead us into a meltdown, which is not a tantrum. It's not a tantrum. It's a valid way of just kind of our system going on overdrive or shutting down from the world where we withdraw.
Right.
So this is just beautiful. It's just beautiful.
It's been so, I can't tell you because I left the public school system. I'd had a 25-year career there. I was doing really well. There was absolutely no reason for me to leave. I got us through COVID, and I said, I'm done. Because what happened really, my youngest son, we took in after his father got gravely ill. He's since passed. And so we have permanent kinship guardianship of our youngest boy. And he had been going through all this trauma, and I was taking trauma-informed care parenting classes when we were going through that. And I realized, as neurodivergence, the intersection of that trauma, because the trauma that I had experienced as a young person related to my neurodiversity, and what my son was experiencing, was equally intense as what my other son was experiencing, although very different reasons why we were experiencing this trauma. And we don't have to live in a world that way. It's, I talk about the ABCs: be aware, be brave, be curious. That's how we should lead neuro inclusion in my, and that's the way since I started and I left, that's been my whole focus. Let's teach everyone I can the ABCs and create a more inclusive environment. We need to lead with curiosity when we're with other people.
You are speaking my language. So I'm an IFS therapist. I'm also an EMDR certified therapist. And we know my expertise is also in sex and relationships. I love that you just said, be aware, be brave, be curious, because as far as internal family systems model goes, those, like if I can just be aware in terms of getting clarity. So this is what we talk about in terms of internal family systems. I know I have more self energy on board, meaning I'm more mindful, right? If I have more clarity in this space, bravery is courage, and I can be curious, right? Take out the judgment. We get so much farther.
Yes, so much more done. So much more done. Yeah. Just lead with the ABCs. That's, that's everything I'm doing at Theara is about that. And I've tried to integrate, because it's about education. It's a different world, but I tried to integrate everything I knew about behavioral science, CBT, family systems, all of that.
I love it.
Into the classes so people could have access that maybe can't afford therapy or can't go in. So they go through the courses and there's just little tidbits to kind of give them an introduction, to guide them through the journey, whether they have kids that are pre-K or kids that are in school or they're at work. I have it for the workplace. So it's completely transformed my own personal life. So regardless of what all happens with it moving forward, it's moved our whole family forward, my friendships forward, everything about what I do forward. And definitely the sexy forward in my life. I will say that, because I don't think I've ever been, felt closer, felt like I could more easily, intimately engage with my husband than I do now. And it's not because it's been easy for us, because we've gone through some really tough stuff in the last few years, but the work that was done through the ABCs really is what got us there. So, I mean, we're having
I love that. Let's talk about that. So let's talk about some of the struggles in your relationship. And then some of like what you've found, like you said, the ABCs. And then I also want to, if we have time, just to talk about sexual sensory experience, if you're okay with that. But let's talk about some of those struggles, as you two are figuring out your brains, because mixed neurotype couples, holy cow, you're right. It's not easy. It's not easy.
No, and I remember, I listened, it's a podcast from forever ago. And I don't know who it was. I can't remember who was talking, but it was a mixed neurodiverse couple. And the one individual it was a dyslexia related podcast. The one individual was dyslexic, and they were talking about it's a processing disorder. So literally they described it as, the wife was saying, I have a speed way, he's still on dial-up connection if you do it in relationship to the internet. And I have always said, for me with ADHD, I feel like I'm a satellite dish and he's like a little tiny funnel, so the information, and I didn't realize that the way I talked to him a lot of times felt like a shotgun. He described it one time in our own therapy as like, you're like a machine gun to me. I just can't handle it. And I not even one where I was talking to him in an unkind way, just literally managing the amount of words that come out of my mouth. So we spent years in therapy talking just about, okay, Renee, you're going to talk less. Anthony, you're supposed to come up with more words, and now we're in a completely different phase. We got through that because I started realizing, okay, I've got to dial it back, and just understanding that I needed to be really more succinct in my language and communication and careful about what I said to be productive. And then we started more recently using visuals. And so it sounds kind of silly, but we literally have a behavior chart on the wall in our bathroom, because we're there every morning. It's a whiteboard, and there's 3 things that we choose each month to focus on that the other person needs. And then for every day that they do it and offer it to us, we give each other a heart on and it's such a visual thing. And I came up with the idea because we were using it with our youngest son, and I'm like, well, this might help us, so, and when you see, oh, he's worked that hard for me, I may not feel like we're connecting all that, but he's been trying all week long, and he sees that I've been trying, and we add up the hearts and we look at them every week. And it's made such a huge difference. And we both felt really juvenile starting it, but it's a visual, and has huge impact.
Well, and that's the reality is for visual learners, especially because we don't all learn the same way.
Right.
So you and I are so much alike. And I do think that neurodifferent females do have different ways of presentation for sure than neurodifferent males. One of them is what you're describing, where for a lot of us, and I'm not going to say all of us, because there are some autistic ADHD females who are quieter, right? And there's also a lot of us that are processing at 100 miles an hour.
Mhm.
And there is like this shotgun. And when we are excited, it feels way intense. So then it feels traumatic to our non-neurodifferent partner, especially like for Chris and I. Chris has PTSD. So it's like if I'm with information, he goes into, it doesn't matter if it's positive. It's just like you described, right? So I love how you've said, just you got to kind of dial it back. And it doesn't mean you've got to change because that's a deficit. No, it's working together. Go ahead.
Yes, no, you just sparked something in my mind. This is one thing big that I do because, we talk a lot about masking, and I did a lot, like when I was first really researching a few years ago, I kept turning it around in my head because there were so many times that masking had worked for me. It was hard for me to see it as something negative that I shouldn't necessarily be doing. And something clicked in my head that editing your behavior is good. And I made up an acronym for edit to help lead me. But editing is different from masking. Masking is hiding, going in the closet. I wear my ADHD like a badge of honor. I think it's a great thing that I was wired neurologically different. I value that about myself. It's helped me in many, many ways. But I do need to efficiently direct my impulses and temptations. Because if I don't learn to efficiently direct those impulses and temptations, then that can lead me down into a very negative spiral. I mean, in the past, I haven't necessarily struggled with addiction, but I have struggled with eating disorder, things that are common for a neurodivergent female. And, I know you talked about with Allie Dearborn, the borderline diagnosis. I haven't actually experienced that myself, but my daughter has, my stepdaughter, and I think it was a misdiagnosis because she's also neurodiverse, and those things can be completely debilitating. And that's when we go into that mask zone. But part of it's because we're not really aware. People need to be more aware of the neurodifferent brain, what the neurodistinct individual looks like, how we operate. We have to change the way we're educating people about these things, because there's not, I sat in therapy from 12 and wasn't diagnosed till I was 29. I wish I had known. If someone had told me, oh yeah, you're ADHD, you're probably a verbal processor, a huge piece of information I would have loved to know.
Yes. No, I love the editing, efficiently direct impulses and temptations. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to just also get back to the visual learning because I love that. I'm probably going to go to a craft store this weekend because here's the thing. What you're talking about is what the Gottman, so Gottman therapy, they've been around, all the literature, 40 years. Well, come on. It's like 50 plus, but they talk about focusing on the positive every day. And Chris and I will get into this rut where life gets busy. And so then all we're doing is we're just nitpicking at each other. And that can be really easy in coupleships. And so what we've started to do is make a conscious effort throughout the day of just getting back into those positive words of affirmation. And then at the end of the day, we do a review. But I love that you have, this is where my raspy singer voice comes in. So we just roll with it during the podcast.
I have that too, so no worries.
I know it just comes in and then I'm a singer. So the visual I think is really key because I know I have rejection sensitivity and I can easily forget. And just focus on like, okay, I get that he did this nice, but right. So I love that you could just see like, no, look at these beautiful things. Okay, that causes me to pause. So I just really want to say that, because we need more of that in relationship. I get so many people that call, that reach out and say, my partner is neurodivergent, or my partner is autistic, my partner is ADHD. Can you help him? Oftentimes it's a female partner with a male, right? Neurodivergent. We're seeing more females. And can you help him so that he communicates the way I need him to? He shows the empathy that I need. It's very dismissive. It's very deficit based. And so Chris and I, and you're doing this too, which is beautiful. It's like, so we do a lot of educating around, okay, first of all, let's take out those D's. Let's take out, now I'm not saying take out the word diagnosis, but I do want us to take out disorder. It's not a mental illness. It's not, let's take out deficit. Now that's even controversial, Renee, in our autism community. I mean, it is like, I get people that get pissed off at me, and I respect that. I get it, who are autistic, that will say, but I really struggled growing up. I did have deficits. I did have difficulties. So I get it. I respect each person's individual experience. That's not what I am fighting for. What I am fighting for, and it is a fight, it just is, because we're up against the neuro majority that is truly thinks their way is the right way. What I'm fighting for is, if we can get people, not just medical and mental health providers, but schools, and then the non-neurodivergent partners and parents, if we can just get everyone to go, this is just a different way. Yeah, they're struggling. But instead of me going, and I'm going to swear here, I've heard people literally say they're fucked.
No, I hear you.
My partner, my kid, they're absolutely fucked. Now, that is not going to help your partner or your child.
No.
To believe that. It's going to harm them. They feel your energy. They know you feel that way about them. Now, I say that with so much compassion. If there's blowback to me, I'm sending everyone so much love and compassion, because I don't intend to offend anyone. I'm literally saying what I hear. And why I'm fighting for a change in the terminology, just like so many of us are, is because that causes harm.
Yes. And people don't, you said it in another podcast.
I did.
Their intention doesn't equal impact. And what people don't understand is that a lot of times, and I'm going to say a word that people probably don't want to hear either, but most people that are abusive are not intending to be abusive. I mean, and that's a huge thing, as a therapist, to understand. And many of us are led into these, many neurodiverse individuals, neurodivergents, get into those narcissistic relationships and abusive relationships. And it starts off great, but they don't have the right frame of mind going in, because they've been labeled and they have experienced all those micro traumas all the way through. So they're just looking for that acceptance and belonging, and they're more vulnerable than the average 100%. Individual. And, having been through that myself, I don't want it for my children. I don't want, I happen to be in a relationship that my husband and I have fought for, and we've done that. We even have a column for extras, so we don't just get our hearts. Like we can write down if they do something extra, like, we went on a hike the other day, and my husband has the horrible, like he usually takes us on an excursion and we never get back on time. And I wanted to be back. I like a plan. I need a plan. And he made it on time. So that was an extra for him. And then we get to do it again. And we see that, so it's just recognizing what the other person is doing and being mindful of the fact that he may not intend to harm me or to hurt me in some way. I may not intend to do it, but we do it unintentionally. And so let's acknowledge one and both parties, and that sometimes my unedited neurodiversity can hurt him. And that's okay to talk about. And that doesn't mean I need to mask it. It means I need to edit my behavior in a way that's more effective to move us forward. I mean,
I
that's
love
the
it.
biggest thing for me, like getting up every day and thinking about, how do I move forward? How do we move forward together today?
I love what you said. So I want to back up to I want to say that so many neurodivergent females, especially, we tend to get in relationships that end up where we are being abused. I mean, a lot of us have a history of that. And we are so open. We want to be loved. We're seeking safety. Allie Dearborn and I talked about this, right? We're
Yes.
seeking soothing. Then we're labeled as, oh, you're love addicted. It's like, so I'm not really. I'm just
Right.
not.
You're
I just,
codependent. You're
oh
all of
my
those
God.
things.
Oh
Yes.
my God. I'm so tired of that word. And in reality, it's like, no, we're seeking soothing and safety. We need somebody to, instead of labeling us as borderline or codependent, to show us how to soothe ourselves, which I love how you have all these beautiful acronyms. And I also want to say, out of compassion to the non-neurodivergent partners who've been in betrayal situations, because that's our expertise, is we do a lot of betrayal trauma, where there's females who've been betrayed and they have neurodivergent partners who absolutely have caused so much harm in their acting out, right?
Yes.
The challenge, though, is that all of that gets lumped together. So the acting out the addiction, for instance, gets lumped together with autism, ADHD. So then the anger of the partner, which, you know what, I get it. Those angry parts that have been betrayed, so valid, so valid,
Yes.
so valid. The challenge, though, becomes when there are these micro and macro aggressions around, your brain doesn't work, you're an idiot, you're dumb, it's because you're autistic. And so I gently, lovingly want to say that those folks listening, your betrayal trauma is so valid. And what has happened to you is real, and it is absolutely unacceptable, and you deserve to heal, and your partner and you deserve to heal if you choose to stay together, and your partner deserves to heal. And that's separate from the neurologically different brain.
Right.
And that diagnosis. And so if you're going to stay together in that relationship, you've got to be open and willing together to understand your mixed neurotype in the day-to-day.
Yes. That's huge. That's so huge, because the other party that's engaged is just as well. My father's very neurotypical. My mother was undiagnosed throughout much of her life, wasn't diagnosed until much later. She's really embraced her neurodiversity through my journey, to be quite honest with you. And so she didn't have any of those skills. And from the outside looking in, I was growing up, I had a lot of anger towards my mother. My father had anger because there were these outbursts. There was this uncontrollable emotion sometimes. And now that we understanding it and having that awareness, and then letting that lead with the curiosity. If you're in a situation where you can remain in the relationship, because there are some times where the other person, and I think many times it's sometimes the neurodivergent individual that says, I don't want to do this, when they wake up to things they don't want to tolerate a more neurotypical person in a marriage or in a partnership. So I definitely think, and I 100% agree with you, that we have to be completely sensitive. It's not about the more neurotypical people are wrong. It's just about recognizing that these are struggles in our relationships, challenges in our relationships that we need tools and skills to overcome. And they're not necessarily have anything to do with someone's neurodistinction. That can be totally over here, but understanding how your neurodistinction affects your relationship is incredibly empowering. And
I agree. And I want to say too, sometimes people will say it's an excuse. The neurodifference is an excuse. So we're not saying, no. I just want to respectfully say, please don't say that. It's not an excuse. It's literally a neurotype. It's almost like me saying your PTSD brain is an excuse for you screaming at your kids. So
Right.
we're not, no, that's not. So it's not, it's a diagnosis, it's a difference. And as I've promoted over and over, I look at it as a neurotype that's a culture. It's a brain. It's like, if we look at it
Yes.
like a culture, where
Yes, I
there,
agree with you completely.
right?
That's
It is.
huge. Yes.
I communicate differently than Chris. I emote differently than Chris, right? I behave differently than Chris. If my autistic ADHD culture of communication and behaving is different, can I, just as though I'm German and he's indigenous, right? He's Lakota, Hawaiian, and Japanese. Can we be as sensitive to understanding our actual cultures as much as our neurotype culture,
I think
right?
that's so beautiful. I love that, Candice, because my husband and I are, my husband's Italian and Hispanic, and I am a bit of a mutt, Irish, English, Dutch, all of that stuff. But yes, our culture has impacted our relationship so profoundly, and thinking of neurodiversity that way is empowering too.
It
Like, that's
is.
huge. It's like a light bulb. Like, why don't we just
Why
look at
don't
it
we?
that way? Yeah.
Right? Okay, maybe I'll
Hmm.
do that. My gosh. Okay. So I'm going to be connecting with you offline, Renee, because I just seriously love what you're saying. And we just need to connect. So, but
That sounds great
I
to me.
want to end our podcast by talking about, for those, I just want to kind of bring this to life again. I created a sexual sensory profile ebook that's available on our website, namasteadvice.com. And one of the things that we talk about so much with folks is we all have a sensory profile, right? Where I might get easily irritated by the clothes I'm wearing.
Right.
I might be sensitive to fluorescent lights, right? I get sensitive to maybe if people are tickling me, I don't like that. Like, hug me, hold me tight. Like, don't give me the light tickles.
Yes, I hate that too.
Oh my God. Certain smells, right? And I'm like, it's weird. My sense of smell, I can walk into a place and just be like, there's poop somewhere.
I'm the same, and my visual is huge,
Oh
which
my
people
gosh,
don't talk
same.
about a
No,
lot. That's
well, no one talks about that, and no one talks about how intuitive we are. Truly, we are so intuitive. We're feeling energy, which is intuition. And then we say what we feel. And because we live in a culture that doesn't like that, they don't
Mhm.
like that. We have a culture of people that like to mask the truth.
Yes.
We speak truth and then we're gaslighted, then we question ourselves. Anyway, but the sexual sensory is all about, like, is it too hot in the room? Do I like the way the lube like smells or feels? Are the sheets the right texture? Is the music like, ew, I can't even do this? Is the ticking of the fan or the clock driving me
Right.
crazy? Have you noticed that in your,
Oh no, yes, we're definitely that. I am definitely that way. Like, I am sensory processing. I like to call it, because of all the D's, alternate sensory reality. I experience my sensory system a little differently. And my kids have the same issues. And so my bedroom is like a boudoir. Like,
oh, I
I
love
make
it.
it like super sexy.
I love it.
I Dream of Jeannie. I know that's like
Oh my God,
probably
I
not,
did
it would
too.
not, but
I
I
did
loved it when I
too.
was there, and I loved her bottle. So
Yes.
it's not purple and gold, but it's teal and gold, and I make it very, like, it's an alternate experience when you come in my
I
bedroom. I
love
want the
it.
best sheets. We don't do a lot of electronics. We will have music sometimes. I like lighting,
Love
obviously
it.
candles aren't always super safe, but we're very into, and also, like, we do a lot of like massage and oils,
Yes,
and all of those things are super, because oils can be like, it's hard to find the right,
it is.
it's hard to find the right stuff. I had a candle that would melt the wax of the candle, and it was like the best. And then they stopped making it. I'm like,
Mm,
oh, what? Yes, no, but I think having that place be like, because I think a lot
mhm.
of people make their bedroom an afterthought. And for
Yes.
me, it has to be like, you feel like you're going to a resort when we walk in our bedroom. And that's so that I can get my sexy on. Because unless I'm like that, if the room is a mess and it's ugly around
Oh,
me and I doesn't feel good and clean, I just can't.
oh, I'm that way too. So what you said is so powerful. It's the setting. It's the setting. And I want everyone to hear that, when I have couples that will say, or I even have clinicians that reach out for consultation that say, this couple, they're not connecting sexually. I'll be like, they need to look at their sexual sensory profile, which includes the situation. And that's the environment. Because if you're not on the same page, or your bedroom, like you said, is an afterthought, it can be the smallest things that for one person, they're like, I don't even notice. But the other person's like, I'm just turned off. Right. And this is the reality. People are having sex, but no one's talking about this. And you have to talk about this. This is foreplay. The sexual sensory experience is an integral part of intimacy. So if the setting isn't right, or you are struggling with the way the person smells or whatever, the clothing, the sheets, like you said, if it's the lube, start there. If people are listening,
no, you have to communicate that to each other. It's huge, and it's awkward sometimes. I get it. You don't necessarily want to hurt someone's I mean, they're the person you love the most of the time. So you don't want to hurt their feelings or say something that might make them, like, smell is something that if there's a weird smell coming out of one of you, that's hard necessarily sometimes to say. But we've had that conversation, and if that's going to prevent you from doing X, Y, and Z, they're going to take care of the smell.
They are.
I mean, and they want to know. Nobody. I want my husband going there with me. Yeah, if I didn't smell good, and just being mindful of that stuff. And then touch is huge. And like, what is touch like throughout the day for you? With my husband, he's, we talk about that. There's some places, because he's big with like public affection. He's okay with that. And I have a harder time. So we have had conversations like, this zone is fine. This zone is not. And it's also, being mindful of just how your family works, because there were some stuff that when we integrated a new member of our family, things changed a little bit about how Anthony and I related to each other in front of them, just being more sensitive to what my son's experience had been previously before moving. So I think all of that stuff is so huge, and the sensory plays such a big role for us as neurodivergent individuals. So what might seem like nothing to somebody else
is huge.
It's huge for us.
It's huge, and people aren't talking about it enough. So the non-sexual also in relationship, the day-to-day will impact what's happening in the bedroom. So I want to just point that out, that you've got to change in the household. You've got to change in the schedule. There's increased tension. There's stuff going on that you're not communicating out of the bedroom. There's not a lot of affirmation or connection. That is going to impact how you show up together. So all of this in the bedroom. So all of this is really important. Oh
Absolutely.
My goodness, Renee, I could go on for hours.
I could too. No, we're definitely talking later.
Yes, we will talk later. Any final words? Any final words for our listeners, Renee? Any words of wisdom that you want to leave with?
I think honestly, like for me, any exploration that you do in a positive way into those ABCs, being aware, being courageous and brave, and being curious about the other individual. If you're struggling in a relationship with your partner, if you just do one of those three, if you can do all three, you're usually on a path forward, and that's the greatest thing for me. I think the biggest thing for me has been, how do I move forward? And sometimes the relationship isn't a healthy one. You can't move forward with that individual, and that's okay. It's better to have no relationship. It's better to have that than an unhealthy one that's not willing to move forward with the ABCs. So I think that's my biggest thing. And whatever you need to do to help yourself stay in that positive mindset, because we're so drawn to that negative space. Our society does that to us all the time and teaches us to escape. And the more we go in and the more we reach for each other, the more powerful, the more positive our impact and impactful our relationships become.
I agree. We got to get more positive. Holy cow. We've
Yes.
got to
And
change
thank
the
you,
dialogue.
thank you, thank you, Candice. This has been so great talking to you.
Yeah.
And it's been wonderful to have this time and to be able to share space with you today.
I love it. Thank you so much, Renee. How can folks get a hold of you if they're interested?
You can reach out to me at Theara@Theara.com, and that's THEARA.com, or you can email me at Renee@Theara.com, and it's RENEE. And I'm all over as Theara Way on socials.
I love that. So we will also post that, in the description for you so that people can have access. And then I'm actually going to put a link. I have kind of the funny ABCs of just people that I love and follow on our webpage, so that people can find you too there, just people that I love and support.
Thank you so
and trust.
much.
So yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful, beautiful interview today. I just want to say to everyone, love is the medicine. You are love. So please find it in your heart to be tender with your sweet selves and to love yourselves and everyone a little bit more. We all could use so much more of that. And until next time on Fabulously Candice, bye.